ups and downs. Definitely try and see the positives in all of this and make the most of the time that it's kind of given me to just rethink about what's, I guess, is important and what you think about food and the way that you want to push that going forward I think it's definitely changed for me.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. It's been a turbulent 12 months, but it has also been one of innovation, adaptability, and change, as professionals have been afforded the time to plan and rethink what they're doing. That moment to breathe has resulted in some pretty incredible new business models, direction shifts, and new avenues too. Will it create a period of positive change? Dave Verheul is the co-owner and chef of Embla and the owner of Saison Vermouth. Dave, how you going?
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
Mate, you've had a pretty interesting 12 months in Melbourne, a little bit tougher than the rest of Australia, but you've been doing some pretty interesting things to the side of the restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, looking back this time a year ago, it was, what we all went through was nothing that you could ever really imagine or no amount of foresight would ever see kind of coming. So, yeah, it's been a bloody crazy year. A lot of great things to come out of it and a lot of interesting things. So, yeah, I mean, we managed to do takeaway food for, just over 7 months in total out of last year from Embla, which is mind-blowing in itself. We started a rooftop bar at the end of that, and then my partner, my fiance, and I started a little booze project as well. So,
was the booze project, the Vermouth, was that something that you'd been thinking about for years, or is this as a result of sort of what's happened in the last year?
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of boiling away in the background for quite some time now. I mean, it's something that I'm really passionate about. It's kind of, has been a hobby of mine for a long time. We've been kind of making things in the restaurant with the idea of pairing them with certain dishes throughout the year. And it really just kind of stemmed from that.
Vermouth is something that's only really come to the fore in the last sort of 5 years in Australia, but it's still not well known by a lot of people as a drink, and it's so herbaceous and aromatic, and there are just so many types. Can you tell us a bit about Vermouth and what you're doing?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things. It is very niche, and unless you're really heavily into cocktails, you probably would not have a lot of experience with it. Some people describe it as a backbone of so many different cocktails. But I think what is really happening in Australia and the States and parts of Europe is vermouth and the family of bitter drinks that surround vermouth. Having a new perspective taken on them. I mean, you got guys like Mate and I here in Australia that have been breaking amazing ground and making amazing vermouth for so long, and it's such a product that's quite a way away from your Cinzano and your old European varieties. Vermouths. So I mean, we started making it. I started making it in the restaurant 3 or 4 years ago. Started making things like making one out of cherries and the pits and the leaves and the wood from the cherry tree, and then pairing it with the cherry dish in the springtime. So it kind of stemmed from that, and a lot of the direction of that came from what I like in food, and I like clarity and of reasonably singular flavors and things like that. So there was nothing like that in the vermouth world. A lot of them were, especially the very old European varieties that you get. There's a lot of caramel as a sweetener, and there's a lot of really heavily spice-driven things. So I wanted something that was fresher and more delicate, really easily paired with food. It wouldn't overrun. It was just nice and fresh. You drink it by itself on ice or a little bit of soda, and yeah.
Well, you're a chef by trade. What's it been like creating vermouth? What's been the challenges involved?
It's been an amazing learning curve, to be honest. As chefs, you're always kind of chasing, flavor, like trying to find ways of, finding the tastiest peach or the tastiest this, and then doing, whatever you can to it, preferably not too much, and making it shine. So it's been a really interesting learning curve. Working with alcohol is very different. Working with a high, the high percentage spirits is a really incredible way of pulling flavor out of things. So yeah, it's been, and just learning new skills and just gaining different, new knowledge. So I think you get to certain points in your career where, while you still push to learn, there's few and far between where you learn large chunks of a new skill, a new thing. So I think in that way, it's been really great. And going through that process of learning how to do this in a commercial sense rather than kind of making 5 liters in the back of your kitchen is, probably kept my brain alive for most of last winter when we were cooking food and putting it into cardboard boxes and putting it in bags.
It's a bit hard to fathom, what sort of happened over the last 12 months, and to think that, something like Embla, which is, a natural wine bar that's got food sort of cooked over fire, essentially, and to be resorted to takeaway. You're situated in the CBD. What were the challenges involved in trying to execute that?
Well, everyone's in the same boat going into that first lockdown. And for us, like everyone else, it was such a moving target of mixed messaging from local government and national government. And you know what? You can't blame them. No one's been through this before, and we're all kind of doing our best. But, we didn't know how we were going to pivot the business initially. Everyone got told to work from home, but we got told to stay open. So we're right in the middle of the city. It's the heart of the business district. And there's no one around, and we're trying to think, how the hell are we going to do takeaway here? There is no one here to pick it up. So, it took us a couple of weeks to figure out what we were going to do. So much of the essence of what Embla isn't down to the food or the wine or the service. It's really kind of comes down to just the atmosphere and the energy that the whole place has together. And it's kind of a culmination of everything. So, we eventually landed on doing kind of, date night kind of occasion packs where we'd do maybe 5 or 6 dishes that you could cook really easily if you'd had a couple of glasses of Chardonnay, and you could do it with one hand and have some fun with it. So, yeah. It took us a little while. One of the issues that we have is when you're working where most 90% of your menu comes out of a 500-degree wood oven. You really need to eat that in 15 minutes, or it's completely gone. So you're getting that to translate into something that could be reheated in a fan force 200-degree oven at home and still be reasonably true to what we do and what we put forward was an issue. I think we got there in the end, and I think over the course of that 7-month period, we spread so much further than our amazing customer base that we already have. So I think we're pretty lucky. We had a lot of people that were really kind of engaged in it. We had so many people that did it every single week, which is amazing, and we're pretty thankful for the response that we had from that. So many, we wouldn't be here if we hadn't had the support from our customers that we did.
I've experienced your food in a couple of different venues, and your food isn't the sort of food that you can cook with one hand. It's a bit more intricate than that. How did you go about, creating a menu that, that someone can replicate at home, because it certainly wouldn't be the food you would normally offer in somewhere like Embla.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my food's changed a lot in the years that have been in Australia. It's calmed down a bit, I'd probably say. But we based the takeaway menus and the style of what we were doing, that offering. We based it around, we've run the Sunday lunches since the start at Embla, and it's a very it's a bit more of a rustic look at what we do, but it's rustic and generous and quite approachable. So, yeah, we based it on that. I mean, not everyone needs to go into the details of how it all works here, but if you can get pretty close to it and it's bloody tasty at home, then that's a good spot to be in, I think.
One of the unfortunate things of the last 12 months is that you had to close the venue upstairs, but you opened a rooftop bar and cinema. Tell us about that sort of period of time and that decision.
Yeah, well, I mean, going into the lockdown and having the meeting, that probably everyone in the industry did with all of their staff were, it was pretty heartbreaking. We, in the end of it, we really didn't lose. We only lost one or two people. We've re-employed everyone else. And, going back into trying to reopen a business with, you being told that you can have 10 people in a room, which means that we would have been, if we had to run this as two separate businesses, restaurants, sorry, there would have been 20 people in the building. It's just, we're not coming back from that. So we made the call to run Embla up and downstairs, which we feel has been the right call, just to keep everyone on. And I think that's turned out really well. It's really changed how Embla works as a business. It's given it a bit of range in the dining experience that we have now. Embla, you would do 250 people on a Friday night, and it's there's a lot of energy in the room downstairs, and people are having a good time, and it can get for all the soundproofing that you put in, it gets a bit rowdy. But now we split that, and you have upstairs, which is really, it's quite cozy. You can actually have decent, great conversation without having to speak too loudly and all of that. And then you still have the energy downstairs. So that's been quite a nice development and seems to be working really well. With the rooftop, I mean, the building next to us is earmarked for development, and will be coming down mid-year, and there'll be a 190 room beautiful hotel going in there. In that space in the old space there is this super kooky 4D cinema that's been there for years, and it's one of those things where you sit in a chair and you have the 3D glasses, and you go through a waterfall and get sprayed with water. It's pretty funny, but the space is amazing, and it's like 70s panels. So we took the lease on that before all of this went, before all of this COVID stuff went down, and we, with the intention of putting like a kind of a gold class Embla style gold class pop-up cinema in there over the winter. That obviously fell through, so the opportunity came to take the rooftop for the summer, which we naturally jumped at. And yeah, I installed myself on barbecue section for the summer, which has been pretty great.
Tell us about Embla. I know it's changed a little bit now, but it's really become the heartbeat of Melbourne's CBD in regards to food, and the real part of that new wave of dining. Tell us about what you were doing there and how it has changed.
I think coming from the townhouse, I mean, I moved to Australia in 2013 to open the townhouse with Christian. And I was probably pretty young as a chef at that time. I was pretty aware that, there was some pretty like reasonable shoes to fill, I guess, in that space. Probably someone who I really look up to. A couple of people who I really look up to have been chefs in there over the time, and you want to give it a red hot crack. So I probably, things were probably had more work going into them than they needed to, but you don't realize that when you're a bit younger, I guess. And then, we were there for 5 years, and you start, realizing things and trying to change, and opening. It's very hard to change, I think, that greatly within an operating business where people already have a perception of what it is and what they come to expect from an experience there. So when you have an opportunity, I think, to open a completely different business, it's a really amazing chance to take a bit of a sidestep and go, hey, we're going to do this. And that was pretty liberating for me personally. There were a couple of dishes and things that we were doing at the start that kind of really just like drove that home. And it was just, there were a couple of dishes where, because we were working with the wood oven and the fire and all of that, and we just figured out, it was just like, you can have this and one or two components, and the simplicity and is the beauty of it. And there are a couple of things that really changed the way that Embla kind of formed in those really early days, and then that just led into each and every other thing going forward. So yeah, I don't know what we were doing. I think if it was anything different, I think, it was food that was probably more approachable than the Town Mouse was, and service that was just, really warm and about having a good time and making people feel good, having a great experience. So I think it was just a combination of everything.
You discovered the calling for culinary life over in New Zealand. Can you take us back to that time? What led to that sort of jump into the hospitality sector?
I've been looking for what it was that I actually wanted to do for quite some time. I was studying at Tug University and not particularly enjoying it, doing this and doing that. So a friend had a restaurant that was owned by an incredibly passionate Lebanese lady, and I started work there, and very quickly she kind of took me under her wing, and she told me, if you want to learn how to cook, you have to get out of Dunedin. So she made me enroll in a cooking university course up in Wellington, and I moved up there a couple of months later. So yeah, I mean, it's a country that has amazing produce, but it doesn't have, the depth of restaurant culture that Australia does. I think it's come a long way now, but certainly where I was from, I grew up right down south in Dunedin. I mean, there's a couple of good restaurants there now. There weren't really at the time, and it was just not a dining out culture like we have here.
Well, that spurred you to head to Michelin star restaurants in the UK, and you ended up working at the Savoy Grill under Gordon Ramsay and Marcus Waring. What was it like working for them? Intense
and amazing. I remember I moved to London. I landed at 7 o'clock in the morning. I went and saw Josh Emmett the following day at the Savoy. He's a Kiwi. And then I trialed and started the day after that. So yeah, it was a whirlwind. I remember my first day at the Savoy, doing the first service, and I was on garnish, and I remember just thinking, I can't understand what anyone is saying apart from the head chef. I was so green, I was so like fresh out of New Zealand that I couldn't understand the English people, even though they were speaking English. It was just absolutely terrifying. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those kitchens. It was so big and it was so busy, and it was operating, at a Michelin star standard, and you'd do 300 people for dinner, and 120 for lunch, and it was so intense. And I really fed off the energy that kind of gave. And I learned a hell of a lot.
You ended up coming back to Australia and being part of, the early form of the Bentley restaurant when it was in Surrey Hills, with some chefs that have gone on to do amazing things under Brent Savage. Tell us about that period of time, because that really set a different precedent for food in Sydney at the time.
Yeah, I mean, kind of previous to that, I mean, I'd worked at a couple of places in New Zealand, and what I really wanted to get out of moving to London and learning there was to find somewhere that was going to teach me, traditional, stock sources, basics, all of that stuff. My personal taste has always been for the slightly more modern, I guess. And I really wanted to find somewhere in Sydney when I moved there to that was going to fit in with where I wanted to go with that, what I was interested in. And I mean, the Bentley was that time at the Bentley, the original Bentley, and the era, and everyone was there. It was just such an amazing period. And, what we were doing was pretty out there, but it was like really delicious and really busy. So, I think it was, very, very formative time for my career, and just, learning to be creative within someone else's vision, and I don't know. It's just, I look back with heaps of fond memories on that time. I mean, I still count Brent as one of my mentors. I think he's, his food is amazingly delicious. Nothing but respect.
What was it like in that kitchen? It was about the size of the average dining table, that kitchen, compared to the kitchens in like the Savoy. How different were those two environments to cut your teeth in?
Well, I mean, like we're having to walk while you're working is overrated. It was a small room, that one. I mean, I think you don't realize it until you kind of go back and see again how small it was. It seemed massive at the time, and what we managed to get out of there was pretty incredible, especially with, anywhere between 6 and 8 chefs and a kitchen hand or two in there. So, I mean, they're obviously polar opposites. I worked grill section at the Savoy for, almost like a year and a half, and my bench alone had, my section alone had 4 target tops on it, so it was huge. So quite the opposite.
You were drawn back to New Zealand, and you've done a lot of work with Christian McCabe, both in New Zealand, and then since 2013, you guys have opened a few restaurants in Melbourne as well. Tell us about that connection and when you guys first met and worked out that you could work together.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't work with Christian in New Zealand. He had recently sold a restaurant called the Matterhorn, and then moved to Melbourne, and then I came in afterwards for the guys who had purchased it, bought it, and ran that for 3 or so years. We met each other through close friends, and there was always a bit of a connection there. I learned a lot at the Matterhorn. It was my first head chef role in a environment that was just incredibly busy again. And I think Christian and the chef he had in there previously had won New Zealand Restaurant of the Year, a year or two before. So it was definitely one of those restaurants, but it was quite an incredible place as well. I mean, there's not many places that you can actually have, an amazing bar that's operating at a world-class level and a really good restaurant, and they're both working harmoniously. And normally, you get one that takes over the other. So it was quite incredible in that regard. But, I did my time there and kind of came towards the end, and I was just kind of looking for something else, I think. something a little bit more, and I don't think it was going to. I didn't think it was going to be in Wellington. It was just a little bit too small, I guess. And then, I've been talking to Christian, and opportunities come up, and you end up in this game. You end up traveling around a bit and moving around a bit, and you kind of go where the opportunities are. So this was a fantastic opportunity to form a relationship with someone who's good at all of the things that I'm not so much in this industry, and kind of away we went. He flew me over from New Zealand to Melbourne. I had a look at a absolute bombshell of a restaurant that was half demolished, that turned into the townhouse, and away we went.
How important is that relationship that you have with Christian? Has there been challenges over the years in delivering the same vision?
No, I think we're pretty aligned in the end result that we want to get. I mean, a lot of it is about culture. A lot of it is about just people really having a great time, and almost like an old school sense of hospitality, which I think we all got a little bit detached from it at some point a few years ago. Hospitality is essentially about making people feel better than when they came in, having a good time, and just, providing warmth and generosity. And he's incredibly good at that. He's incredibly good at instilling that ethos and culture in all of the staff, front and back of house. So, I think it's been pretty good so far.
You mentioned earlier that it's not until you've got older that you've learnt restraint on the plate. And what you're doing at Embla is really about simplicity and letting a few key ingredients shine. Tell us about some of the producers that you use, and maybe a dish or two that you can tell us about that sort of exemplifies your cooking at the moment.
Oh, God. We've recently gone all organic with all of our protein, all of our meat, which has been exciting. We're using, we've partnered up with these guys down here called Hagen's, and they've been just a fantastic resource in just kind of working with a product that is essentially very wasteful, and just trying to do that in the best way possible. We've never been really that red meat heavy or centric here. We do a little bit, but we try to, what we do is we try to, put our best foot forward with that, and provide something that, is ethically farmed, is as sustainable as possible. We, for years, worked with a husband and wife team who have a farm called Transition Farm down on the very end of the peninsula. They basically contract grew for us for a long time, and just they've recently gone with they were entirely reliant on hospitality outfits for all of their income. So when all of this hit, they pivoted into growing for seed only, which is a real shame for a lot of people. The produce that they were or they do grow is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I'm lucky enough to be on the Delicious Produce Awards panel for Victoria every year, and I mean, I still remember the first time I ate a radish from these guys, and it was, a beautiful purple radish, and it dripped like it had so much moisture in it that it dripped like an apple. It was absolutely insane. So I think we're quite lucky down here to have, there's a really amazing handful of organic farms growing a lot of kind of heritage and heirloom breeds of vegetables in commercial quantities. So yeah, we try wherever we can to buy direct from farmers and farms, cut out middlemen. so that they can get, as much of that revenue as they can. Yeah.
With the events of the last year and Embla changing a little bit, and now it's 2 levels. What's your plans moving forward? I know you like to take on new things, and you've got the Vermouth brand as well. Have you got something in the works that you can tell us about?
There is something in the works, but I'm not sure if we can talk about it yet. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I'm not entirely convinced that we're out of the weeds yet. So it's going to see how we go, and we'll run it like this for a while and see what happens. I think, we had a week-long snap lockdown the other week, which I think freaked a few people out. So we'll see where it goes to first.
The events of the last year have impacted Victoria more than the rest of Australia. How's it been for you personally? Do you see your role and your place in the industry a little bit differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think personally last year was a bit of a roller coaster for me. I think, going into the first lockdown was absolutely heartbreaking, and then having that time to actually spend with your family is a pretty unique thing. So that was really great. I think, coming out of that, things were really optimistic, super motivated. And then going back into the second lockdown was just a huge kick in the guts. And I think for a lot of people in Melbourne, it actually felt like we really weren't anywhere near through this yet. But yeah, I mean, ups and downs, definitely trying to see and definitely try and see the positives in all of this and make the most of the time that it's kind of given me to just rethink about what's, I guess, is important and what you think about food and the way that you want to push that going forward I think is definitely changed for me.
Well, Dave, very much looking forward to see what you have next on the cards, and when you can reveal it, please let us know. We'd loved having you on Deep in the Weeds today, mate, to share your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks so much, Huck.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.